The backlash over the defund the police movement, which began in 2020 after the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, continues this week as new data shows the country has failed to stop deadly police shootings. According to a new report by the Washington Post, fatal police shootings last year set a new record since the Post began tracking these data in 2015. The Post data show police shot and killed at least 1,055 people in 2021, the highest total since 2015. That's up from 1,021 in 2020 and 999 in 2019. And the rate at which black Americans are being killed is more than twice as high as the rate for white Americans. And a new poll finds that the public believes that the recent rise in crime is somehow because of someone somewhere took money from the police. A new Political Morning Consult poll of 2,000 registered voters found that 75% think that the defunding of police departments is the reason that violent crime is on the rise, and 69% of the voters think that an increase in funding for police departments would lower crime rates. The only problem with all that is, as the New York Times reported back in October, police departments from New York to Los Angeles who saw their budgets targeted have gotten all that money back. But although Democrats like Richie Torres of New York proclaimed last week that the defund the police movement is dead in New York and good riddance, Congresswoman Cori Bush says that she won't back down from continuing to support the movement, even though members from her party have been asking her to stop using the phrase. Joining me now to discuss is professor and former chair of the Pan-African Studies at California State University, Los Angeles, Melina Abdullah. Melina, the problem has not gone away. It has gotten worse. We have more people shot and killed by the police in 2021 than before George Floyd. What do you make of those data?
Right. Well, it's really, really troubling. Here in Los Angeles, we've seen the rate of police killings nearly triple year to year. So police in Los Angeles killed 20 people in 2021, as opposed to 7 people in 2020. And we know that that's a result of backlash, that we've seen rhetoric come from both the right as well as liberal white supremacy, as well as those kind of spineless folks who hold office and pretend to have Black friends, who say that we have to fund the police. The truth is that while we had a momentary win of pulling back police funding, that we didn't get the investments that were promised in real crime prevention and intervention measures, which begin with making sure that our communities are well resourced. And so we stand with Congressmember Cori Bush and are grateful that she stands with us. I'm also a core organizer with Black Lives Matter. We continue to say that the real solution to driving down both crime and driving down violence against Black people, and by extension everybody else, by police, is transferring those funds, defunding the police so that we can fund the things that actually create safe communities.
What do you make of the data that comes out of this poll, which is either misinformation or lack of information, where people have now come to believe, 75% of them, so 3 out of every 4 Americans now believe that the money has already been taken from the police departments. And that is why you're seeing a rise in crime. That is absolutely not true. Not only did those departments hold on to that money, some of those departments actually raised the amount of money that the police departments were getting. What do you do with that kind of misinformation or being misinformed about what is actually happening around defund the police?
Right. So it's really important, one, that we question the poll, right? The poll itself only polled 2,000 voters, right? We can look at polls like the ones that we ran in Los Angeles in 2020 and 2021, where we polled 25,000 people. And the results were very much the opposite of what you see in this most recent poll run by Politico. We also made sure that we were intentional, including Black voters and Black residents and Latinx voters and Latinx residents and working class people. So made sure that we had a representative sampling. But this question about misinformation is really, really important. We need to remember that large police departments invest huge amounts of money in their public relations arms, as do police associations who benefit from having folks want to spend more money on police. And so the results of the polls don't necessarily ring true. We know that data actually shows absolutely no correlation between more police and less crime. What data does show is that when communities are well resourced, you drive down crime. And that is multi-decade data, right? So dating back to the 1980s, when we began to see real studies about this, we found that when you have livable wage jobs in communities, when you have permanent supportive housing in communities, when you have health resources in communities, those are the communities that are the safest with the least amount of crime. And if people just use common sense, think about what communities you think of as the safest. And in those communities, do you see a lot of police walking the streets, or do you see more resources in neighborhoods? And I think that there's a really commonsensical answer that the safest communities are the communities with the most resources, not the most police.
We're still waiting to see what Biden is going to do on police reform. You know, the police reform bill in Congress has basically died. It's been reported that Biden was looking to release some executive orders to coincide with Black History Month. What do you think is going to come of that, particularly after this very high-profile meeting between Biden and New York Mayor Eric Adams on the very issue of police reform? And Adams is not necessarily a person who is more progressive on the idea of policing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very hopeful about that meeting. Neither Biden or Adams are very progressive on this question of public safety. They have a very narrow view of what public safety is. They both want to spend heavily on police. We're very disappointed that the Biden administration has failed to listen to those of us on the ground who not only have our fingers on polls, but have our fingers on the pulse of communities. We're very disappointed that he's not meeting with more progressive and imaginative policymakers. People like, if you want to go to New York, we'd love for him to meet with people like Kristen Richardson Jordan, the new council member in Harlem, who's advocating for a set of policies that would bring mental health resources to neighborhoods rather than more police. And so we think that we have folks on the ground who really have their fingers on the pulse, and hope that we can sway those more powerful policymakers and politicians, and of course our president, on these issues.
How do you think this is going to play politically going into 2022 in the midterms? You know, I know you say we should question the poll. Let's just assume that the poll on this case is correct. It would suggest that Republican messaging on this issue of defunding police has worked, that they have demonized it and mischaracterized it to such a degree that it has sunk in with voters. How does this movement around the concept of reallocating resources in public safety keep traction or get more traction if it is being hammered this kind of way going into 2022? And even coming out of 2020, many Democratic operatives were saying, this is why you lost. This was your problem. You can't say defund the police. It's dumb. It's stupid. Well, who would say that? You know, even the former president said, the moment you use that phrase, you start to lose.
Right. So it's really problematic that the Republican rhetoric and the Democratic rhetoric are so similar. We want to make sure that we recognize that it's not just politicians that should be doing work or setting policy or setting the tone on this, but really the boots on the ground that should be setting the tone on this. As the world is outraged, as cities like Minneapolis are outraged around the murders of people like Amir Locke, right? We really need to honor their memories by doing the work that justice demands, not just kind of seeking to satiate the political ambitions of those who would seek to climb political ladders. I'm here in Tampa, Florida right now, preparing for Andrew Joseph weekend. Andrew Joseph III was 14 years old when he was profiled and ultimately killed at the hands of Hillsborough County sheriffs. And for 8 years, his family has been struggling for justice in his name. It's unfortunate and saddening and dismaying that the Democratic Party has refused to really move forward the kinds of really meaningful policy demands that we've been making, like ending qualified immunity. And so I think it's incumbent upon organizers, incumbent upon residents and people on the ground to educate our neighbors and our peers and our neighborhoods around why we say that we still have to defund the police. We still have to undergo transformative change around policing and completely reimagine a public safety system as we, commemorate the 10th anniversary of Trayvon Martin, as we uplift Andrew Joseph and Amir Locke and so many
Right.
others.